right, welcome in YouTube family. I am Reverend Kelly R. Jackson, and what we're doing is I'm introducing a new segment called A Moment with the Author. And what I'm doing right now, and you all are going to see me every now and then look down at my notes, but I had an idea of doing, and I'm going to introduce this now because I'm going to do it for every book, and I'm going to explain that in just a minute here. I had an idea of, I do a lot of ministry things on the channel, and I talk a lot about the Lord because I am a minister, and we do a lot of videos from inside the studio where I do my radio broadcast, Your Life of Purpose radio broadcast. But I had an idea. I laid down last night, and I actually had an idea, and I said, take this time, let's take a segment on the YouTube channel, and let's talk about the books that you've written. Now, those of you who know me personally, you know that I just released my 10th book called Overcoming Your Pharaoh. And what I did after finishing that 10th book was I went on my Facebook page for the publishing company, Kelly R. Jackson Publishing, and I did kind of a countdown because I just did kind of a retrospective on my writing career. And 10 books is a lot of books, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And for every day for 10 days, I posted each book and the description of each book, and I talked about the inspiration and everything that went into writing the books. But then I had an idea last night when I laid down. I said, for the new year, why don't we do a video series talking about all of the books that you've written, all of the things that you put down on paper. And so I woke up today and I said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that. As you see on this shirt here, this is a shirt that I do, a hashtag Don't Die With It shirt. And it's something that I'm always sharing with people. Don't die with whatever God has given you to do. And so even as I got that idea, I go back to the shirt, don't die with it. If you got the idea to do something like this, go ahead and put it out there for the people. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk, this is going to be a brief video, only going to take a few minutes of your time. I'm going to talk about my very first book that I wrote way back in 2006, book called Temporarily Disconnected. Have a copy right here, Temporarily Disconnected. This is the revised edition because of the 10-year anniversary. I went ahead and revised it. I'm going to talk about that as well. But Temporarily Disconnected was a book that I wrote back in 2006. And here we are in 2018 now. So this year in November, all the way in November, it'll be 12 years since I wrote my very first book. And so we did a revised edition. Let me talk about that before I get to the questions, because I'm going to answer 4 questions. And then we're going to be done with this video. But I want to share with you all the thoughts I had behind writing this first book. When I wrote the first book in 2006, I was not a minister yet. Even though the call was on my life, I was still yet running. I was not a minister, and I was not married. So when I wrote that first book, I wrote it from the perspective of somebody who was still dating, who was still out there trying to find their way. But I did not include anything on marriage in the book because I had not been married. And even though I had some thoughts and some opinions, I'm just a firm believer that you need to experience something before you can actually talk about it. So not having been married before, I just didn't feel it was proper for me to write about marriage, and I hadn't been married. And I'm so glad that I took that stance, because as I got married, I've been married to my lovely wife, Angela. We've been married, as of recording this video, 6.5 years, almost 7 years. But there are things that you go through in a marriage that you don't go through when you're single. And you think you might know some stuff about marriage, but you don't know anything until you get married. And so then we did this revised 10-year anniversary edition, and I changed a few things from the original to reflect the path that I'm on right now, to reflect the ministry, to reflect the fact that I am a married man. So then we added a chapter in the book on marriage. So I just believe that the revised edition of that book was stronger than the original. So I'm going to answer a few questions. We did a moment with the author here. I'm going to answer a few questions concerning Temporarily Disconnected, my very first book. And so the first question that I wrote down here for myself to answer, what was your motivation? What was your motivation for Temporarily Disconnected? Well, let me give you the complete title of this first book, Temporarily Disconnected, A Perspective on a Decline of Black Relationships and Families. and then the Revised Edition says, and how we can achieve restoration. So what was my motivation? Well, me being a black man, I saw some things in the black community that I felt like were to our detriment. I honestly felt like we were doing families backwards. We weren't doing families the way that God intended for us to do families. And it was permeating all through our relationships with one another, all through the things that we were doing with one another. Then it went on down to our children. And so that's why I called it temporarily disconnected, because I felt like we were disconnected from what God intended for the family to be. I said recently in a sermon that I was preaching, I said it's a trick of the devil that we kept making babies, but we stopped making families. And so when I saw the black family being splintered apart, I saw a disconnection there. But even at that, I called it a temporary disconnection, because I still, somewhere in me, had hope that we could still achieve everything that we were supposed to achieve. And so my motivation was to say something to the black community as a black man, a single black man at the time that was still dating and that was still trying to find his way and still trying to do what the Bible says. And the Bible says, he that findeth a wife findeth a good thing. I was still trying to find my wife. And so in that first edition of the book, I wanted to address the black community, because that's what my heart is. Those are my people. These are my people. And I wanted to say something to my people. So there was my motivation. There's a piece in the book, before I move on from the motivation, there's a piece of, I call it poetry. It's a writing, and it's called An Open Letter from Adam to Eve. And I've always told people that I felt like that was the greatest thing that I had ever written. And in a lot of ways, I still feel that way. An Open Letter from Adam to Eve. I included it in the Temporarily Disconnected book, but I also included it in my second book, which we're going to talk about in the next video that we do in this series. But Temporarily Disconnected was built on the premise of that letter, that open letter from Adam to Eve. And the point of that letter was for Adam to address Eve in all of the ways in which he had failed her as a man. And then he explains to Eve in some of the ways that he felt like she failed him as his wife, but then how they can come back together for the sake of their children. And so the motivation behind the book was not just the black community, but when I wrote that book, I had a lot of feelings about the dating and the back and forth that the black community was going through. And so the basis of Temporarily Disconnected came from that first piece, An Open Letter from Adam to Eve, and then thus we came up with this book. Next question that I wanted to answer is, what was your process for writing your first book? Now, I get this question a lot because, again, I'm 10 books in. There's a lot of people that I know that are talking about writing books. There are some people that I'm going to be helping in 2018 to write books. And so people will say, what was your process for writing your first book? And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have any magic formula. I didn't follow any guidelines or anything. I sat down and I just started writing. And I just started writing. I've been writing since I was in high school. I always wrote poetry. But I sat down and I just started writing whatever was on my mind, whatever I was feeling about whatever particular topic. And I didn't concern myself with it coming out the right way. One of the things I'll tell people when they're trying to write a book is, don't sit down and say chapter 1 and then try to write your book that way. Just write. Especially when you're doing this type of book where you're just speaking from your heart. It's not a story or anything like that. I say sit down and just write. And that's what I did. I went out and I bought me a laptop computer so I could always have my computer with me. So anytime a thought or an idea came into my head, I could go and open my computer and start writing and getting it out of my system. Because one of the things that we mess up with as writers is believing that we're going to remember it all. You're not going to remember it all. So my process for writing my first book was to sit down and just write. Don't try to edit it as you write. Don't try to do it as you go along. Get everything out that you possibly can. Just talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. You can go back and edit later because you're going to have to do it anyway. So that was my process. I sat down and I opened up my heart and I said, just write it down, Kelly. Write out whatever you feel, and then we'll put it all together later. So that was my process. And quite honestly, My process has not changed that much. I'm more inclined to write down notes as I go along. I'm more inclined to write down thoughts and subjects and headings for certain chapters, and then go back in and fill in the blanks. But because I had not ever written a book before, I just sat down and went for it, and I just sat down and wrote. And I'm gonna share with you my thoughts at the end of this. So, third question that I have, and I only got 4 here, is why did you self-publish? Why did you self-publish? So, here's the thing about self-publishing, and I always tell people this. Now, when you're writing a book, you got to decide what you're trying to do. If you're trying to get rich, you don't self-publish. I mean, you can get rich through self-publishing, but it is a grind. But if your whole purpose of writing a book is I want to make $1 million, I want all of this stuff, you need a publisher. You need to find you an agent. You need to find you a manager, and you need to hope that somebody buys your manuscript and give you a bunch of money up front to write your book. And I'm not saying it's impossible. Whatever your dream is, go ahead and chase it. But I self-published primarily because I had a lot of things to say to the black community, and I did not want anybody editing what I had to say. I didn't want anybody going into my book saying you can't say that or you got to take that out because it won't sell. I didn't want anybody, as you saw, that cover is very plain, and there's a reason for all of that, because I wanted it to be about the message and not the cover, and I still feel that way. I self-published because I wanted to say what I wanted to say, and I didn't want anybody to tell me what I could and couldn't say. Very briefly, let me just share this. Those of you who don't know me personally, you know that I grew up on Prince, and I was a huge Prince fan before he passed away, and he was the epitome of just do what you feel. Try not to let anybody control your work. Try not to let anybody edit you because they don't know what's in your heart. And so even to this day, and crazy enough, even in ministry, I still pattern a lot of my thoughts based off of what he says. Just do whatever God is leading you to do in your heart. And that's how I felt about this very first book, was I didn't want anybody telling me what I could and couldn't say. And so I decided to self-publish. Now, let me be clear for those of you that may be watching this and thinking about self-publishing. Self-publishing is a grind. You have to do all of the work yourself. You have to promote yourself. You got to sell your books yourself. You got to get out there. You got to hustle. It is a grind, and it's not for everybody. But if you love what you do, you don't mind going hard for it. And so I love this book from cover to cover, and I did not mind going hard for my work. And I still wanted to say what I wanted it to say. And to this day, even the revised edition, this book says what I wanted to say. And so that's why I self-published. I just wanted to be in control of everything. I still believe that God will provide, and I know for a lot of people, they don't think that way. They want to get their money, but again, as this shirt says, don't die with it. I would have been really, really, really bothered if I got down to the end of my life, and I don't know when that's going to be, and I had not done this book the way that I wanted to do it. So I'm glad that I held to it, and I'm glad that I went ahead and self-published so that it looks exactly like I want it to look. It says exactly what I want to say. Last thing, and then I'm done here. Did you achieve your desired outcome? This book here, this is like I said, this is the first of my 10 books. It's still my favorite book. This is still my baby. This is still the book that still brings tears to my eyes. I still think about when I first got it in my hand, when they sent it to my mom's house, and I did not know it was there. My mom took me in the den, and she said, your books are here. And I opened up the box, and I saw my name. I was a published author, and I literally cried in my mother's arms that night. This is still my baby. And so did I achieve the desired outcome? Yes, I believe I did achieve the desired outcome, because this book is 11 years old now, and people still talk about this book. The people that have bought this book, the people that know me, people are still referring to this book. They still talk about the red book, as they say. It still does what I want it to do. I'm still promoting this book. I still believe in this book. When I go back and I read through the book, when I read through it again, when I got ready to revise it, I saw that I was already a preacher. I just hadn't got the license. I hadn't really embraced my call. But I see the word all the way through the book. But did it achieve the desired results? It was never about me being rich. It was about me writing a letter to my people. And I wrote that letter to my people. And I believe that some people received it, and I believe that there's more people that are going to receive it. And so I did achieve my desired outcome. Temporarily Disconnected, the revised edition says a perspective on the decline of Black relationships and families and how we can achieve restoration. The basis of this book was about getting our people to a place where we can achieve restoration. Are we there yet? Of course not. Of course not. But I believe as long as we have stuff like this, as long as we have people that are willing to push a narrative like this, we can still get to restoration. I still believe in love. I still believe in marriage. And I still believe in the Black family. And I wanted to make sure that I made a statement that let everybody know how I felt about the Black family. That's it, y'all. That's it for this session of A Moment with the Author. Again, like I said, this is book number 1 out of 10, which means I got about 9 more of these videos to do. I'm going to share them with you periodically. The next book that we're going to be talking about is my second book, which is a book of poetry, a book I promised that my mother that I would write. Scenes from the Blue Book. There's going to be a lot to say about that book because that was probably the most challenging for me to publish, and I'll tell you all about that in the next video. But I thank you all for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you got to see a little bit of an insight into who Kelly R. Jackson, the author, is. Listen, I want you to click this video. I want you to like this video. Share it on social media, particularly with those people that you know that are thinking about writing books, that are thinking about becoming authors, publish, self-publish, or if they're looking for somebody to publish their work. We just want to be an inspiration to somebody. So click the like button, share it on social media, subscribe to the channel so that you can see when the next video pops up in your timeline. I thank you all for taking time out. Listen, remember what the hashtag on the shirt says, don't die with it. Whatever it is that God has told you to do. If he told you to write a book, don't take it in the ground with you. Go ahead and write your book. We pray that you all enjoyed this video. God bless y'all.